Mhm. Joel, was Roberta out tonight, and are you the vice chair? Mark Kogler, are you on the line? Lori, can you hear us? Hello, Joel, or actually Mark Kogler. I believe Roberta is absent tonight, or can you run the meeting for us?
Darren.
Yes.
Darren, this is Mark. Yeah, that's correct. And I'm ready to go whenever you guys are.
Okay, we are ready to go. Thank you.
And Darren, you have at least on my end, a significant kind of echo.
We'll try and work on that, Mark.
Yeah, it's still there.
This is Commissioner Christensen. Does anybody have their ears on? This is a mic test.
Hi, this is Mark. I can hear you clearly.
This is Sherry. I can hear you too.
So Mark, why don't you go ahead and start the meeting roll call?
Got it. Call the meeting to order. The Planning Commission meeting of July 14th, 2020. I think, Darren, as per the last meeting, am I supposed to read these 3 paragraphs about the setup for the meeting?
I believe that's what Roberta does, so that would be good to do. Thank you.
You didn't come through clearly, so I'll go ahead and do that quickly. For the record, please note that due to the COVID-19 emergency and in compliance with the state and county shelter-at-home orders, and as allowed by the Governor's Executive Order N29-20, which allows for deviation of teleconference rules required by the Ralph M. Brown Act, Planning Commission meetings will be held by teleconference only until further notice. A video stream of Planning Commission meeting presentations will be live streamed and available to play later on YouTube by accessing the link www.prcity.com/YouTube. Rather than attending in person, project applicants and members of the public must call 805-865-7276 to participate via phone. The phone line opened just prior to the start of the meeting, or written public comments can be submitted via email to planning@prcity.com. Written comments received prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting will be posted as an addendum to the agenda online at www.prcity.com/agenda center/planning-commission-5. If submitting written comments in advance of the meeting, please note the agenda item. With that as background, I think typically we move into the Pledge of Allegiance prior to the roll call. I had talked to Commissioner Castillo about saying the pledge, leading us. I don't know are you on, Commissioner Castillo? I got an email or a text message that said he's having some trouble logging in. Is that the case?
He is having the trouble. This is Lori.
Okay.
I'm going to try to resend the link to him right now.
Okay, great. I think in the meantime, we will continue on. Therefore, I will ask Commissioner Davis, who I know has done this many, many times, to lead us in the pledge. I would also ask that everybody except Commissioner Davis mute their mics because we get a lot of feedback if more than one people are reciting the pledge at the same time. So Sherry, would you please lead us?
I'd be happy to, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Staff moving into roll call, please.
Commissioner Christensen.
This is Lori Wilson, Assistant Planner.
So I
We're on
believe,
roll call of the commissioners, if you would be so
Sure.
kind.
Sorry about that.
and Mark, this is Darren. Am I still echoing? Is it still an issue? Mark, this is
Hey,
Darren.
Mark, why don't I give it a whirl? This is Joel.
That's fine, Joel. I was just going to do the same, but be my guest.
Okay, Commissioner Christensen, Commissioner Christensen,
I believe he has no sound on his end. Can you hear staff?
Commissioner Gibson, I'm not having much success, Mark.
I can tell.
Commissioner,
If any commissioners are actually connected right now, please indicate your name and indicate your presence.
Commissioner Davis is present.
Commissioner Christensen, Commissioner Gibson, Commissioner Castillo,
I'm finally on the line, and I'm sorry for missing the Pledge of Allegiance, Mark.
That's fine. Thank you for being here.
This is Commissioner Gibson. Can you hear me?
I can now. Thank you, Phil.
All right, thank you.
And this is Darren. Can you hear me now?
We can. We are trying to roll on our own, Darren.
Correct. Am I still echoing?
Yes, not so bad though.
It's better than it was.
Okay. So, and we understand that Commissioner Christensen is trying or cannot hear. Commissioner Christensen, if you can get out and try to reconnect. Okay, they're working on that. So we know Commissioner Christensen is out there and listening, trying to connect in. We'll work on that. So my records show that all the commissioners are present except for Jorgensen. Is that correct?
That is correct, Darren.
For staff role, Lori, why don't you go ahead? Lori's here. We have Katie in the room. Darren's here. Jessica and Dave are also here running the, helping with the technology, which we understand is being a little complicated for us. But with that, we'll still work on Commissioner Christensen, and I'll give it back to you, Chairperson Kogler.
Thank you, Darren. Next item on the agenda is general public comments regarding matters not on the agenda this evening. Are there any public comments regarding matters not on the agenda?
There are none.
Thank you. Item F is the agenda items proposed to be tabled or rescheduled. Are there any items that meet either of those categories?
No, there are not.
Very good, thank you. We will move then into, we have two public hearings this evening. The routine or the approach for both public hearings will be the same. We will cover some additional information or some orientation information at the beginning. There will be a staff report. The planning commissioners will have a chance to question staff of anything that they're curious about. We will then open the public hearing as appropriate. There may be an applicant's presentation. Questions from the commissioners will follow that, and then we'll open to public comments. Then ultimately we'll close the hearing after that. So our first hearing of this evening under item G on the agenda, number 1, is Amendment 19-03 to Plan Development 17-005, and conditional use permit 17-009, P17-0087. It's 2981 Union Road as a location, APN 025-362-014. And the applicant is Ravine Water Park. And we are ready for a staff presentation on that item.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission. This is Lori. It'll just take me a moment here. I'll share my presentation with you. David says it's waiting for approval for me to request control. Okay, thank you, everyone. So again, the first item before you tonight is amendment to Plan Development 17009. This is Amendment 1903 for the Ravine Water Park overflow parking and multi-use path. The project originally received approval back in 2018. It was a request for overflow parking area for 96 vehicles, and then also included a multi-use path to be constructed to connect the parking lot to the Ravine Water Park on the north side of Highway 46. The project amendment before your consideration tonight is a request to extend the overflow parking area to accommodate an additional 200 vehicles for use by the water park. So this would create a total of 296 vehicle spaces. So the parking areas are located across the highway. You have Highway 46 East here, the Ravine Water Park, and then this area outlined in black is where the previous approval was. So on the top of your screen where my cursor is where the 96 spaces were approved. And then this area outlines where the multi-use path connects under the freeway and over to the water park. The area dashed in blue is where they're looking to expand the parking area down here. And then both lots will use this existing access road that's coming off of Union Road. So the reason, for the request really is the Ravine's growth and success and limited area on the existing site to expand their parking. So they've had to look for these alternative areas to do so. When looking at the site here down in blue, the applicant, determined that they could utilize this to accommodate an additional 200 spaces. And a benefit of doing this too is it's going to eliminate traffic trips over up here on Airport Road as well. As far as the status of the previous project, the applicant did pull an encroachment permit for both the path and the access way from Caltrans and the city of Paso. They have yet to start construction on that though. This is a more detailed site plan for you. It shows the 96 spaces that were previously approved here. And then this is where the area of expansion is for the additional 200 spaces. They're not proposing any site disturbance, improvements, or grading to be done. Again, they intend to utilize this existing access coming off of Union Road. And then just simply roping and chalk to delineate the parking areas to keep vehicles and pedestrians in the appropriate areas and outside of the creek area. So staff has added conditions to this project. The first is that they install new directional signage where this number 1 is here, so at the intersection of Union and Union Road, and then as well down here at Golden Hill and Union Road. Both signs would be indicating that people are supposed to be using this Golden Hill Road and Highway 46 intersection to go westbound onto Highway 46, so to make a left-hand turn lane there. The second condition is actually that they obtain a permit from Caltrans to close this left turnout where this number 3 is indicated, so that it would no longer be an option for people to go this way and go westbound onto Highway 46. And then lastly, that they provide ongoing dust control measures when the parking lot is in use. So the options before the commission tonight are to adopt Resolution A, approving Amendment 1903 to Plan Development 17005 and Conditional Use Permit 17009. This is allowing for the expansion of the overflow parking area to accommodate an additional 200 vehicles, and that's subject to the standard and site-specific conditions. Option 2 is to amend the above listed action. 3, refer back to staff or DRC for additional analysis. And 4, make findings to deny the application. We do have Jamie Jones on the line with us today as well. She's the representative for the applicant, and she has a presentation also prepared for you. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back over to the commission, and staff is available for questions, or if you wanted Jamie to do her presentation first, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Unless any of the other commissioners have an objection, maybe we'll jump out of sequence a little bit and let Ms. Jones do her presentation, because that might help with questions that we might have. And then immediately following that, we'll revert back to questions from the commission for both the staff and the applicant. Does that work for everybody?
Absolutely.
Okay,
That's
thank
fine.
you.
Sounds good.
That's fine.
Let's proceed in that manner.
Good evening. This is Jamie Jones with Kirk Consulting. Is my screen sharing? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you for your presentation, Lori. I think a lot of what I will be sharing with the commission tonight will reiterate the information provided in Lori's presentation. The project is located at 2981 Union Road. The applicant is Brett Butterfield with the Ravine Water Park, and Brett has joined me in the office tonight, so he is available for questions if the commission has questions of him, as well as Rob Miller from Wallace Group should also be participating in the meeting. The project site is located off of Union Road and also has frontage on Highway 46 East. And I've highlighted on this slide many of the surrounding uses that I'm sure you're all familiar with, including Barney Schwartz Park, the Wine Country RV Park, and the Paso Robles Sports Club. The project is an amendment to an existing plan development that was approved in January of 2018, which approved 98 new overflow parking spaces to serve the Ravine Water Park. The other important component of the approval back in 2018 was the multi-use path connecting the parking approved in 2018 to the ravine, and that multi-use path travels under Highway 46. The access for the proposed parking will be from the access that was approved with the previous plan development, so it will propose to utilize the access from Union Road, which is an existing all-weather road and driveway, and as Lori indicated, the encroachment improvements at the Union Road intersection have been approved with the permit issued by the county. There's no, the additional parking would operate seasonally, and just during the months that the ravine is open, which is typically beginning of June through August, September. And the project does not propose any site disturbance or grading. The parking will be established through roping and chalk delineation, and we're going to be using that rope to ensure that access does not go into or across Warrow Creek, and then the chalk just to delineate traditional parking stalls and directional circulation movements through the parking. The native soil will be rolled for compaction. We're not proposing to import additional fill or anything that would otherwise change the existing features on the site. The pedestrians, once out of their car, will use the approved multi-use path going underneath Highway 46 and connecting to the ravine. Detailed on this slide is the site plan, and we're showing, just for context, there are 195 spaces that exist over at the ravine parking lot that's accessed from Airport Road. There were the 98 spaces that were approved in 2018. And the current parking plan, while the use permit, we're requesting up to 200 spaces. The parking plan, as we've shown on this exhibit, can accommodate 181 spaces. We asked for 200 spaces in the event that we're able to fit a couple more spaces on the site plan. And included on this slide is just a little more detail. This, you can see the access coming from Union Road, and also highlighted in white on the screen is the plan for the approved multi-use path connecting over to the west side of the ravine. The parking takes up about just under 2 acres. We are not proposing any structures for the seasonal overflow parking, and topography of this area is generally level to some moderate slopes, but the parking is located on the level portions of the site. And this slide shows some pictures of the site. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but just to give some context visually. We did work with 2 different biological firms for biological and botanical surveys on the site, and the surveys did not identify the presence of any protected species. They did, however, in their reports to recommend pre-construction and avoidance measures that would be implemented to ensure that there would be no impacts to the sensitive species. And those are included as conditions of approval with the recommendation tonight. And there will be no permanent conversion of habitat. Lori went over the proposal for directional signage as recommended by the city engineer. And the purpose of the directional signage is to ensure that the traffic, that anyone leaving the site that wants to go west on Highway 46 will make their way to Golden Hill, and so that they can make that transition at a controlled intersection. And I guess we can just end with the why. Why are we proposing additional overflow parking? Well, number one, there's a demand, because as the park is successful, unfortunately it is closed for this summer, but those of us that have had the opportunity to visit the park with the families know that on the hot summer weekends, there is demand for parking. So we don't see this parking being full every day, but it is really intended to meet the demands for those peak attendance days. And it's all about reducing that cross-traffic turning movements onto Airport Road and trying to keep people off of Airport Road and get them to this side of the freeway if possible, again, to limit the traffic onto Airport Road. And why I inserted this slide is it shows the convenient access that this parking area provides to visitors, whether you live out on Golden Hill, Niblick, Sherwood, Creston. If you're out in those neighborhoods and you want to go to the park, you don't have to get out on the freeway, and you can take Creston Road and over to Golden Hill and get to the parking without having to go out on the Highway 46 and cross over to Airport Road. So it's about safety and reducing those turning movements. And with that, I am available for questions. As I said, I'm joined with Mr. Butterfield, and Rob Miller with the Wallace Group is available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. That was very helpful. Lori, any other staff comments before we turn it back to the commission for questions?
No, none at this time.
Okay. Then we'll kind of run down the line. I guess I'll start with Commissioner Davis. Do you have questions of staff or the applicant?
You know, I was in DRC, so I'm quite familiar with this project. I do think this is maybe a question for Jamie or Brett or whoever. We're very excited about the pathway and the fact that this parking lot is actually closer to the Ravine Park. Exactly how will they enter the park? I'm just curious, will they have to go from the front gate once they get to the end of that walkway? What is the entrance pattern? I'm just curious.
Hi, this is Jamie, and I'm going to open it up to Brett to provide an answer to that question, Sherry. Yeah.
Hi, Sherry.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So no, right back in the back, we started, as you know, this pathway project. It will be 4 years ago, November 1st. So we've already been picking away at landscape and things back there, whatever we could do on our own side, fencing and stuff. And it is ready to go in the back. So it'll be back kind of at the back of our lazy river, I guess the southwest corner of the project. They will come there. They come in, that is where we will check bags, temperature check, whatever we have to do in this day and age. And then it's under a kind of a shade structure that was already there. And then they can split and go 3 different ways from there, depending on where they're going in the park. But no, you don't have to go up all the way around the top. It's about probably from parking lot to end the park, 350 feet or something walk. We're obviously on the same plane. The parking lot we're putting in is on the exact same plane as the water park is. It's just got the embutment for the freeway down the middle. So it's dead level, and it's the width of the 2 freeways till you're going into the park.
Okay, thank you. That was the only question I really had. I'll let the other commissioners ask.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Neal, questions?
I do have a question regarding the mitigated negative deck. I see the original was not included in our staff report, at least I missed it if it was. And I was wondering, with the addition of the 200 cars, did we ask a traffic consultant if that would make a significant change, or did we just think that it would not?
Hi, Commissioner. This is David Athey. Are you referring to the new or the existing parking that's shown on the screen to the top of the screen? We did work with. Go ahead. Sorry.
The original MND was for 96 parking spaces. Increased that by 200%. And I was just wondering if we looked at that increase, because we're relying on the original MND, if we looked at that increase as an impact.
Right. I think I'll defer to planners on the impact question. However, on the question of did we work with a traffic consultant, we did. We used Central Coast Traffic Consulting. Worked with them and the applicant quite closely on the max attendance and trying to really dial in the increase in traffic we're going to see. And the result was the requirement for the signage to encourage people to use the Golden Hill Road in the interim, and then long-term look at closing the left out onto the westbound Highway 46.
So, David, did you do that as part of this agenda item or the previously approved conditional use permit?
That was part of this agenda item.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Christensen, any questions?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Castillo?
I don't have any questions. I, along with Sherry, was on the CRC for this, and my questions were answered. And Sherry just actually asked the question that I was going to answer or ask, so I'm good to go.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Gibson, questions?
I do have 2 areas that I just need to educate myself on. So the first one, for staff, can you just affirm that the original plan development is still active? Because it was originally approved more than 2 years ago. And my understanding from staff is that construction is not started. So normally I would have expected that the PD would have expired after 2 years. Can you just please affirm that the PD is actually active?
So this is Darren. So the original use permit and development plan was approved with the water park itself back in the early 2000s. And then it was amended to get the 96 spaces, and the 96 spaces have been installed. The portion that hasn't been completed is the pathway under the highway. But in terms of the use permit and the development plan, that's been ongoing since the early 2000s with the approval of the park, which has been constructed. And then this project is in addition to add additional spaces.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to get some more understanding about the engineering division condition item number 2 about closing the left turning movement on Highway 46 East. Who actually is requiring or suggesting that happen at this point? Is that something that the cities is thinking should happen now, or is that something that Caltrans is requesting?
That is both the traffic engineer that the city hired and my own recommendation at this point, based on the turning movements and the hours at which the traffic on Highway 46 at its peak, and the time at which a lot of cars will be leaving the park, during the Friday, Saturday, Sunday time periods.
So I guess my question, David, is that is that beyond the project that's before us today, just because I over the years have hung out at like Barney Schwartz Park for a long time, there's a significant amount of cars that utilize that to actually do what is suggested as being stopped. So I'm a little concerned and questioning what the reasoning is, when my understanding is at some point there's going to be a complete intersection, roundabout, however you want to characterize it, at some point. That I'm just wondering what the rationale for removing it now, because I don't see people stopping, turning left. So what is the plan to prevent them to do that? I don't think removing the lane is going to stop that.
So there would be improvements to the intersection to channelize people into turning right. What that exactly looks like right now, we'll have to work with Caltrans on. It'll be similar to a foot ramp type design, I'm guessing, that you see periodically up and down state highways and freeways. So that, in terms of that's how it's going to look. Now there is a project. If you look at the screen, there's the one that's shown on Union Road. Yes, that's the one. And then just to the west of that is a property that is entitled for a hotel. You have the same condition to close that left out. And really it comes down to safety. That left turn is very problematic. You're crossing 2 lanes of traffic, looking over your shoulder to the left towards town. And then you have to merge into traffic going westbound. So there's multiple conflict points at that intersection. And adding additional traffic there, based on the existing project that's conditioned and this project, we feel it's appropriate to close this left out. And we've also analyzed that in our traffic circulation element, which also called for the closure of that left out. We do realize that the interchange project is planned for this location. However, there is a funding constraint at this time. The project is not funded. We are moving forward with design at this time, but it's uncertain when and at what time that would happen. So we feel it's appropriate to limit those left outs at this point. At the point actually the applicant decides to move forward with this additional parking, or the other project moves forward with their project.
All right, that answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have just a couple. I'd like to pick up briefly on Commissioner Fields Gibson's comments. David, this improvement that ultimately would allow right turn only out of there, would it be a requirement that be in place before this parking starts operating?
No, actually, that is one of the reasons for the signage that is proposed, is that, working with Caltrans is quite a process. as the applicant will be able to tell you, unfortunately. So we've provided them with 18 months after the use of this parking lot. To get that, he'll have some time under his belt to, figure out the operations of the parking lot. As they mentioned before, it is overflow, and then it'll also give time to get through permitting with Caltrans and come to a solution for that intersection.
So is the onus for that improvement solely on the water park, or is the hotel share in that? And how is that improvement funded?
Each of those improvements are on, there's no requirement for each project to help the other project do the work. They could amicably work together to do that, but there is no requirement. Since the hotel was conditioned first, they don't have any requirement to assist the water park, and so this water park has the same requirement. But they could work together.
Okay, so is that timeline really driven by what it takes to negotiate and work with Caltrans?
I think that's a fair and reasonable time frame.
Okay. And then a broader perspective of planning, the volumes coming off of this change that now will take Union over to Golden Hill and what will become a roundabout. That traffic you indicated, I believe, has been figured in. Is that both with the current stop configuration and the future with a roundabout at that intersection?
So the roundabout is currently under design by the city, and the roundabout itself is all the land use out in this area. The roundabout sizing and configuration is based on all the different uses out here. So it will accommodate this traffic from this project and future projects in this general area. In terms of stop control, the stop sign already operates at a failed level of service during the peak hours, so this project won't appreciably affect that.
Okay, thank you. There's reference in the materials as well as in the presentations we had this evening about dust control, rolling of native soils. Is that adequate for proper dust control for this parking area?
Well, I think, from my standpoint, water is probably the best dust control. There are other methods of dust control, non-toxic soil binders and those kind of things. Really, I'm going to leave it up to the applicant to figure out what is best for their site, but we expect that dust be controlled, and that if there's any complaints about dust or anything like that, then we would work with them to make sure that they're implementing dust control on their project.
Okay, thank you. And then last minor question, in the staff report on page 11, it talks about additionally project plans, drawings, and specifications will need to show boundaries and some other information that's listed there, which I don't need to read. Are there any further projects planned, drawings, and specifications if this is basically just fitting on the landscape as it exists today and sticking some posts and roping and so forth and signage in the ground? Is there any further design work to be done here?
Not for this additional overflow testing area. There's the site plan that was provided, which shows the boundaries in the top of the creek that they're to remain out of. So that would be all that we're receiving for this specific area. There were plans previously, of course, for the multi-use path and the improvements to the access road.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of commissioners for either the applicant or staff? Hearing none, we will move to open the public hearing and accept comments from anybody who is wishing to express some, or do we have any this evening?
No, we do not have any callers.
Okay, thank you. In that case, we will close the public hearing and turn it back to the commission for additional discussion and a motion. Discussion, specifics, anything, Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize, I listened keenly to Field's questions, I distinctly remember the dialogue we had about the hotel going in and with the circulation element. And I'm pleased with the, closing that off eventually. I see the directional signage as a real improvement and a real safety attribute. So I'm glad you asked that, Field, but we've had a lot of dialogue about that, and I'm glad David explained that. Are we ready for comments right now at large?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm really excited about the safety element that's being presented here, keeping people off of that Airport Road and 46 intersection. I really think that should this be approved, I think, this is a great tourist destination. There was a slide that Jamie showed there that showed the exciting elements going on in that whole area with the Barney Schwartz Park and the RV park. And there's just some real excitement going on there, but safety is an issue with the extra traffic. And I think this is a great solution. I think personally, when the locals find out that there's parking over there off of Union, it's going to be wildly acceptable. So actually preferable. So I'm really inclined to support this here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Neal, any comments?
Just a comment regarding dust control. It seems that the engineering division condition 3, applicant shall provide dust control on an ongoing basis during parking lot use, could be a bit open to interpretation. I was wondering if we wanted to include the APCD's 20% opacity limit and the prompt nuisance violations or prompt nuisance violations as an inclusion in that. David, what do you think?
I am not familiar with the APCD requirements, but
so it is following. It is the AQ-1 dust control measures, but it seems to be kind of geared towards construction activities. And I was just wondering if because I mean, who's to say what's dusty? Is that wholly up to you, David? If it is, then I'm more than comfortable with it.
So this is Darren. Maybe I can add a little bit. What we're dealing with here is the existing mitigation measures. The air quality condition was a standard based on the 96 project. It's something that will continue over into this project. But I would agree, if there are complaints related to dust, then our engineering staff, our infield engineering inspector will be notifying and checking out the project. We will be checking in with the owners for dust control. So I am confident that beyond the language of AQ1, if we get dust complaints, that we're going to be checking in with the staff there to make sure that it's handled. Following up on that, to add a new mitigation measure isn't on the what's being proposed tonight. I think the commission could add a condition on the use permit that requests that staff work diligently with the operators to make sure dust is not a nuisance. I think that's something we could work on. But and then I think whether there's a condition here or not, there's a requirement to meet the APCD standards for dust control for the standard conditions.
Okay, so first and foremost, I was not proposing an addition to the mitigation measures. I'm still concerned that the dust control on an ongoing basis during parking lot use is a bit open-ended. But if staff is assuring me that they can enforce dust control, then I will be satisfied.
Darren, this is Jamie. Can I clarify one item regarding the dust control that might help give the commission some comfort?
Commissioner Kogler is
Yes. Go ahead, Jamie, if you want to add something.
Yeah, thank you. Whenever I provided in my presentation about the rolling of the native material, that was really intended for compaction for the parking. We do intend, there is a water truck that is owned by Mr. Butterfield that's kept on site. And so that will be available for dust control. And the nature of the parking that will be coming to this site is that it will be, one trip in, one trip out. So it's not, parking coming in, several different times a day. You have your crowd coming in and you have your crowd coming out, which would coincide with the opening and closing of the park hours. And so there will be time to, on the hot, dusty days or whenever dust can be seen present, to utilize the water truck for dust control.
Commissioner Neal, do those answers satisfy your concern, or do you have additional points?
I am less than satisfied, but I will go along with it.
And I believe you're agreeing to go along with it is really based on the fact that in good faith, staff will work with the developer to monitor and correct any problems that occur with dust coming from the site. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Neal?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Christensen, any comments or discussion points?
Thank you. I want to echo Commissioner Davis's comments. I really was happy to see that there's an effort to try and take some of that traffic and that, the busy traffic off of the airport road. Going in and out of there so many times, it's just been such a dangerous bottleneck. So I'm really happy to see that. I'm kind of hoping that the proprietors will think about maybe making this a little bit more of a permanent situation where, as Commissioner Davis mentioned, that maybe locals will be using it more often than not. Although that does bring up the issue about dust, and that is a concern of mine. And I'm just going to have faith that the staff is going to take that into strong consideration when they look at this. It won't be so much during the construction of it, I'm sure. I think Commissioner Neal was trying to point out that it is vague and it can be interpreted too vaguely. So I really hope that the applicant will make every effort to take that in consideration, because we all know, water truck or no water truck, and I know that the park's going to be open. You're going to have cars coming out probably primarily in the beginning and the end of the park opening and closing, but there's still going to be traffic in there during those times. And so that area can get kind of breezy and that dust can move. So that was a concern of mine as well too. Other than that, overall, I like the concept. I think it's really smart. I think we need that, again, to take the traffic off of Airport Road. And so I appreciate that. As for this, the direction of traffic, I think that's a long time. We've needed that no left turn onto 46 there from Union for a long time now. So hopefully that will get done sooner rather than later. And I want to thank everybody. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Castillo, any comments, discussion points?
Nope, not for me, Commissioner Kogler.
Thank you. Commissioner Gibson.
I would start off by echoing the comments from my fellow commissioners. I am fully supportive of the idea and concept of expanding the parking and offering not only additional parking, because the Ravine has been wildly successful in my opinion, but that it will, as my fellow commissioners said, it will help mitigate a lot of the traffic of trying to cross over 46 and then fight your way back from Airport Road back onto 46 to go home. So I'm fully in support of that, of the project itself. I I already had my conversation with staff in regard to the dust, so my question in that regard was already answered by staff. I am still strongly concerned about the idea of this being the solution of the engineering division condition number 2. I'm not fully convinced at all that that's the proper solution at this time, and I'm further concerned in hearing confirmation that apparently the onus is going to be put on whichever applicant wants to go first, as opposed to some sort of a sharing arrangement on the financial cost of something like that, which normally has been the case. You know, you contribute towards the project. You don't have to do the whole project yourself. I just, having lived here for a very long time, I'm just anticipating people either coming along Union Road or coming from, traveling eastbound, or coming from like Barney Swartz and traveling westbound, that I'm not sensing that what I'm hearing so far is going to create anything other than problems. That even if people have to turn right and they have no choice, it'd be like almost like you realize there's a freeway on-ramp and you're just going to have to go down the freeway a mile or so and figure out how to turn around. And I'm actually anticipating that happening a lot. So I'm questioning the timing of it. I'm questioning that one applicant has to bear the entire cost for that sort of a project, and I'm questioning the design as it's been outlined, because honestly, there are no real details. So I have a lot of questions about how that would actually work. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Gibson. Likewise, I have many of the same thoughts that have been echoed here, and so I won't go over those in detail. Just the dust is still a little bit of a concern as to how that's handled, but I, like Commissioner O'Neill, will trust that staff can follow through on that. Truly, this access change at 46 in Union is still a mystery to me, even after hearing the discussions as to exactly how that happens, when that happens, and who pays for that, and how critical that improvement is prior to the operation of the additional 200 cars of parking or an additional X number of rooms in the hotel or whatever it might be. I wonder here what has broken the camel's back really on getting this to move forward. Was it all of these projects, or has this just been long planned? So that's still a gray area for me, but I guess like the other items, I'm willing to trust Mr. Athey and other staff to continue to push that forward as it needs to be done. Any other comments from commissioners at this point in time? If not, would anybody like to take a shot at a motion?
Sure, I'll take a shot, Commissioner Kogler. This is Commissioner Neal.
Gotcha. Go for it.
I'd like to move to adopt Resolution A, approving Amendment 19-03 to Plan Development 17-005 and Conditional Use Permit 17-009, allowing the expansion of the overflow parking area to accommodate an additional 200 vehicles subject to standard and site-specific conditions.
I'll second that.
I'll second that.
We have a second by Commissioner Christensen.
Yes.
Any further discussion by Planning Commission members? If not, I'll ask staff to call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Neal.
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Castillo.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson.
No.
Chairperson Pro Tem Kogler.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-1.
Thank you. Thank you to the applicant and the owners and representatives for the presentation that you gave us. We will now move on to our second public hearing of the night. It's Plan Development 20-01 and Conditional Use Permit 20-07, P20-00006. It's at 2125 Ardmore Road, APN 025-362-040. The applicant is Ardmore Development, LLC. And it's a request to construct a 65,000 square foot self-storage facility with wine locker storage, office area, caretaker unit, and I believe also some safe deposit type boxes as well. So with that, I would ask if there's a staff report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Darren Nash, City Planner, making this report on behalf of Darcy Delgado. This is, as you mentioned, the mini storage component of the Daniels facility out at 2125 Ardmore Road. So not too long ago, the commission saw the Daniels Woodland project on the corner of Ardmore and Ardmore. That project was recently completed, and that facility is under operation. If you recall, there was a subdivision related to that development plan for Daniels Woodland with the intent at the time for a mini storage facility to be located on where it shows on the northerly portion of the parcel. Subdivision is still in process and working on recordation. So the project before you tonight is a 65,000 square foot mini storage facility on the 4-acre parcel with a caretaker unit. There is a slight modification that staff is looking for the Planning Commission to consider, and it has to do with the setback to Ardmore Road, and we'll get into that a little more as we look at the site plan. This also has a use permit to take a look at the operation of the facility as well. So looking at the site plan here, this is showing the facility. The gray buildings are the standard mini storage buildings. The wine storage building along Ardmore, which is oriented to north and south, would be a separately built building from the mini storage buildings as well as the office. Nick Gilman, architect for the project, is in attendance and will be available to answer questions as well. Looking at the site plan, the red dashed box is the area of the setback. So the zoning code has a 25-foot setback requirement for outdoor storage areas or also mini storage areas. In this situation, the project predominantly meets the 25-foot setback. There is an encroachment of the wine storage building into that 25-foot setback area. So technically, the setback has been met. The building is moving forward, but that really, with that installation of that building and with that encroachment, it actually meets the intent of the setback by helping screen the internals of the storage facility from the road. So staff feels that having that encroachment of the building into that setback is appropriate in this case, but technically we need the amendment in order to meet that section of the zoning code. This has been reviewed by the DRC, and the DRC didn't have any concern over the setback with that building there. One thing that did come up at the DRC was the landscape palette for that setback area. So this is oriented Ardmore Road. So we are looking up would be to the east. So the cross-hatched wall area would be that new wine storage building. The DRC asked that the applicant provide a more specific landscape plan for that area. And this is what was submitted for that. So it does a little better job at showing the mix of landscaping and the number and size of plant material. This is elevations of the specific mini storage buildings, typical storage buildings with roll doors. And this is an example of the proposed office building. In the background there, you see the wine storage building. And this is the elevation of the wine storage building. Taking a look at the elevations, the bottom elevation, it would be the elevation as if you were standing on Ardmore Road looking back at it. It has some roof elements, some cupolas along the top, but there was discussion at the DRC about this facade area. There is a landscape plan which we showed initially that will cover this area, but there's also the intent that the Daniels Woodland would do some elements in the future that we know that they are professional in doing and could match some of the elements that they've done on their other facility. Again, I'll let Nick Gilman kind of talk a little bit more about that. Darcy did put a condition of approval in the plans that requires that the final details of the buildings come back to the DRC prior to the issuance of the building permit to better address those elements. I would give the applicant some time to determine what those would be. And this is a kind of a perspective view of that same view of the wine storage building and onto the internal of the mini storage building. And you can kind of get an idea of the way that two-story or the two-story height that doesn't have a second floor that I'm aware of. But that height of that building will help screen the internal storage buildings from views from Ardmore Road. And this is a view of looking from kind of the Highway 46 back to the south. This is the rear of the facility, the rear of those mini storage buildings. They're shown in white here, but they would match the colors shown for the elevations of the mini storage buildings. So what this is indicating is talking about the possibility of some phased construction and just looking for clarification from the applicants and from Nick Gilman on timing of the mini storage buildings versus timing of the construction of the wine storage and the office buildings. Want to make sure that the Planning Commission understands whether this is going to be all done in one phase, meaning that prior to the occupancy of the mini storage buildings, the wine storage and office building would be built, or if there is the intent of wanting to do a first phase, which is the mini storage buildings, and come back with wine storage and the office buildings later. It wasn't clear in the project information whether it was proposed to be phased or not, but we thought it would be important to discuss that with the Planning Commission. So the options before the commission tonight are to approve the draft resolution with the development plan and the use permit, or amend the above action, or refer the project back, or make findings for denial. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Darren. As we did with the last item, the last hearing, I guess if the commission's okay with it, I would ask Mr. Gilman to offer a few comments, particularly addressing the point staff brought and put on the table tonight about the construction timeline and any other things that you feel are important. So Nick, do you want to offer some comments here?
Sure. Good evening, folks. We were just talking about with the owner, Ron Daniels, this afternoon about timing. We're finally getting some feedback from the mini storage people. It's very likely to be at least 9 months before the mini storage portion of the project is done. And that was our intent, was to do the mini storage first because the owner felt that he could monitor and the project from their existing office structure, which is immediately south of this project. But given the time it's going to take us to do the mini storage, I know that I'm going to get pressure from the owner to proceed with both the office and the wine storage. So I would suggest that they would probably be submitted for construction in about 2 months, plan to DRC. DRC's already reviewed the office structure, and I've stated all along that we were intending to come back to DRC for the wine storage. I was upset at the DRC that Joel wasn't there because he could help me with insulated metal panels, because I've never had to do one. And I don't know, this offers a lot of possibilities, but I'm not really conversant with them. So that's the intent. Our initial intent anyway was to do an insulated metal structure for the wine storage facility. And Joel's welcome to comment. The only thing I would add is that, yeah, some of the drawings are a little weak. And I plead with the computer-ese kind of thing. They'll only be about the wine storage structure looking from Ardmore Road, which is the perspective that's on the screen at this point, is 4 feet of retaining wall to a 16-foot eave height. So you're only going to see 11 or 12 feet of wall from Ardmore Road. And the reason for the enhanced landscaping is a legitimate call. We tried to draw it at a 1:40 scale originally, and 1:40 scale doesn't give you much opportunity to show you what the actual planting is. That's why we blew it up. I'm not sure I agree with staff's interpretation of the ordinance, which I've read too, about the setback to the wine storage building. If there, I don't consider that a part of a mini storage or a mini storage kind of element, which is specifically noted in the ordinance. But that's neither here nor there. I appreciate their interpretation that it does help screen the mini storage. Any specific questions I'll try to answer. I will say that in this electronic age, no one's ever given me, and I haven't seen what the conditions of approval of this thing are. It would be, I wouldn't mind seeing those. Other than that.
Okay, thank you, Nick. A couple quick points. I guess, Darren, as we proceed with this item this evening and we get ultimately to a point of a motion, I would like to make sure that you provide guidance necessary to make sure that we're adequately addressing what I think is still to me a little confusing, and that's the phasing of this. I heard some qualifiers, but I think I heard the intent now is to do this in one phase, given the timelines of all the construction elements. But I think we just need to tie that up with ultimately the motion that we approve tonight to make sure that we're consistent with the direction that's intended to go. Regarding the availability of the conditions, those should have been available on the city's website with the agenda item being listed here. So those should be readily available for the applicant or anybody in the member of the public to obtain those up to the meeting time, as up to right now, as a matter of fact. So with that, I would ask commissioners for questions of staff and of the applicant as appropriate, and start again, if we can, with Commissioner Davis.
Thank you. Yeah, I was in the DRC meeting, so I am familiar with this one as well. Whether it's staff or maybe Nick, I noticed, I just have a question. In the north elevation, it was a couple slides back. There was different kinds of fencing. Maybe Nick could comment on that. I see some very attractive metal iron fencing, but I also see some chain link. What was the variety there? What was the thinking?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question, Sherry. The iron fence is on Ardmore Road and it returns 25 feet to the buildings. The buildings themselves actually act as our fence. And they're, as you can see, they're on, given the grades that we're dealing with, they're on an average of about a 4-foot retaining wall. So the chain link was infill between, we have a 10-foot infill, a 10-foot gap in the buildings. And we just were going to use chain link there. And then at the very west end to the swale, if you remember on the site plan, there's that drainage swale. We were going to fence that area with the chain link. But the Ardmore Road and the return to the buildings from Ardmore Road would be the iron fence.
And would the materials, Nick, on that be the classic with the slats in between? I mean, I'm trying to envision that. The rest of it is very appealing. I'm just trying to envision what kind of is the typical chain link fence. I've seen varieties out there.
Well, I don't think we've actually considered that as yet. In fact, if you want to make a point of it, I would encourage the owner to use at least at that 10-foot gap to go ahead and use the iron fence, the wrought iron fence. But we've got on the west property line, you may or may not remember from the original site plan of the whole project, there is a chain link fence that runs north and south for most of that west property line. And that's what we're connecting to. And that's,
okay.
That's about 400 feet west of Ardmore Road.
Okay. And it does appear that since we saw this in DRC that you have put together an expanded or enhanced landscaping plan, or I think we requested a more robust one, and I'm seeing that. So I appreciate that tonight. That's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Neal, questions?
No questions, just to help Mr. Gilman, it would be Kingspan, would be the insulated panels. They do a really nice product.
Okay.
I've got their catalog, Joel. I don't know how to attach them to a building though. You'll have to show me.
Those details can be worked on outside of this meeting. So we'll move on to Commissioner Christensen.
Thank you. I think my questions are for staff. Darren, could you kind of go back a little bit over the easement encroachment and that portion of it? I'm curious to note, one, is this something that we that has been done in the past? Is this something that is new in this case, or would it also set a precedent? The other question I have is in regards to the phasing of construction. I saw some note, and I'm just trying to find where I saw that the owner was considering not building the office or the wine storage, just doing the mini storage for right now, and then proposing to build the office and wine storage later. And then the other question I had, I was noticing under the engineering division conditions, I was just a little confused. It mentions that, they're going to put a sewer pump in and pump into the neighboring property, which the applicant, I believe, owns. And then the applicant may also apply for a septic waiver from the city council in lieu of installing a private lift station and force main once they have access to sewer. I guess my question is, it goes down into two things there. It says the septic waiver could be requested from council prior to building permit issuance. And then below that, it says the property owner shall connect to sewer and pay connection fees with the city engineer deemed sewer is available. So I think maybe that kind of needs, I wonder if we can clarify that a little bit, and so I can get a better understanding of it. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. And Commissioner Kogler, just to let you know too, that Ron Daniels, the applicant, is available to speak as well. So maybe once we get through some of these initial conditions, we can get Ron on the line, and I'm sure he can provide some input as well. But to answer some of Commissioner Christensen's questions, the first one regarding the setback request modification. So this isn't an easement situation. The situation is the zoning code in the C3 zone in this area of the city between, on the east side of Golden Hill and south of Union. This has an overlay in it that just, because there's some residential out in this area, and this is a overlay that's been around since the 90s. So the intent is that projects in this area, it's been C3 zoned since the 90s as well. So you have some residential uses that are on a commercially or commercial industrial zone property. So the whole idea was that as this area started to develop, that if there was a situation where it was adjacent to residential, that there are some special conditions that would apply. The other is that related to storage facilities, outdoor storage, there are special setback requirements and landscape requirements for whether it's an outdoor storage tow yard, which the Planning Commission saw one on Ardmore not too long ago, or whether it's construction storage, which we did with the Spur project that was adjacent to the Gilead Lane residential. There are some special setbacks required. In this case, we have a kind of a blanket setback for storage facilities to have a 25-foot setback. And what we're asking the commission tonight is to consider that the setback for the wine storage allowed to be reduced from the 25 to the 7 feet or whatever it is, since that storage building was going to help screen anyway, and that's going to be a better situation for screening the storage, internals of the storage, rather than just landscaping. So that's what we're requesting tonight. It is not a precedent setting because the development plan section of the zoning code gives the Planning Commission the ability to allow for modifications for the PD zones. So that's really what we're asking for tonight, and it would be consistent with other development standard modifications for projects around town. This also then comes to the phasing. So there had been discussions earlier on about, and I believe it was at the DRC, regarding the timing of the wine storage and the office building, but it wasn't clear whether there was going to be the request to occupy and operate the mini storage prior to the wine storage and office. And then the staff was just wanted to make sure we discussed that, and if the wine storage and the office was going to be done at a later date, if we needed to add any conditions related to that. But from what I heard from Mr. Gilman tonight was the intent is to start on those buildings first, and that being the case, the current conditions of approval of the development plan are that it be in one phase. So that if there was a request to do mini storage buildings, they would need the office and wine storage buildings to be completed and the project to be completed as one in order to get occupancy. And that's what staff was just trying to clarify. If there was a situation where the wine storage and the office would come later, then I think there may need to be some more discussion by the Planning Commission on what would be then constructed on that earlier phase. What would the fencing type be? What would the depth of the landscaping be? And what would the timing be for the wine storage building to come back if it was going to be separately? And that was just all staff was trying to clarify on the phasing. And then I'll let City Engineer Athy answer the question on the sewer related condition.
May I make a comment?
Yeah.
David, this is Nick again.
Let's let David answer first, Nick, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. David Athy, City Engineer. Commissioner Christensen, so the applicant and their neighbors have done a lot of work to install sewer in Ardmore Road, actual sewer lines for a future connection at Union. At this point, the connection is not made to Union Road. There's an additional 800 that needs to be connected, and so they're proposing to use the existing septic system on the neighboring property for sewage disposal. Now, the caretaker's unit is not going to generate a significant amount of wastewater for this project. So, we think it's appropriate to let them use the septic system next door until such time sewer is available. However, I'm giving them the option too, that if they want to install a septic system on their property, that they can go to council and ask for that septic system waiver until such time sewer is available. Now, the requirement to connect the sewer when sewer is available, meaning that the sewer lines that are out there are connected to Union Road, really comes from the parcel map for this project on previous approvals, and so that is just carried forward into this project.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Darren. I had thank you for pointing out. I didn't mean to say easement. I meant setback. So thank you for correcting me on that. I'm sorry, Nick. You wanted to say something really quick before I followed up?
Well, let's get the sewer thing taken care of if we can. David, this whole 8 acres has never been split. It's proposed to be split, but we never activated it. It's all one parcel. So the idea of having an easement and so on from this northerly half to the southerly half, those really at this point don't make too much sense. The reason for wanting to split it originally was a financing issue with the banks, and that went away in the course of events. So it still remains a single 1 acre parcel.
Okay, so
that's understood. The applicant still, I'm sorry, Mr. Christensen. I'll respond when you need me to respond.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. That's fine. Thanks, David.
Thank you. So that's understood, Nick. Thank you for that clarification. Just for the commission clarification, there is an active parcel map on this parcel. So if the applicant did decide to move forward with lot split, which would be his choice, then this condition would still cover that the need for a deed notification for the parcel, and would not affect the project if they did not do it.
So to follow up on that, that's kind of what I was getting at. I'm glad you brought that up, and thank you, Nick, for clarifying that hasn't occurred yet. I guess my question was leading to what you kind of just discussed, Mr. Athey, that so if the applicant does split the parcel, and then let's say down the road they want to sell that parcel off independently, or the project or the mini unit storage unit place off separately, there's no requirement that they'd be tying into sewer if they've already got a septic system on site. Is that how I'm understanding that?
They will be required to connect to sewer once sewer is available. So let's say that the parcel is split and sold, and they provide an easement for the station or install a system on site. The condition of the parcel map that just be connected to sewer. So they would at some point in the future they will have to connect. Will have to cease operating their septic systems and this little private lift station and use the public sewer.
Okay, and thank you for that. It's just a little confusing in the wording from 12 to 13. It makes it the last sentence makes it sounds like they can just in general apply for a septic waiver from the city council in lieu install of a private lift station or force main. So maybe looking at that language, if you're looking at that on page 54 on agenda item 2. And then, so thank you for answering those questions. I don't have any other questions right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Castillo, questions?
The only question I did have was about landscaping, but I think I already got answered. I feel comfortable with that. That'd be a showstopper on my end.
Commissioner Castillo, you were a little garbled from what I was hearing, but it sounded like you were comfortable with what you'd heard and ready to pass the baton to someone else to comment. Is that correct?
Correct. Sorry. It's windy where I'm at.
Got it. There you go. Thank you. Commissioner Gibson.
Oh, thank you. I might have had my first question answered by Nick, indicating that parcels have not been split. So, but I'll put it out there anyway, just to see what the thought is on that. So, in reading this, it looked like either that that it had been divided, or that it was anticipated to be divided soon. So I was just curious about the shared driveway, and just making sure that I understood that. So that the driveway that is indicated on the bottom right-hand corner of the page that's up on the screen now, that goes into the back of Daniels Woodland, would be a shared driveway, and that if my thought was that if the parcel actually was split, that there would need to be a deed restriction or some sort of deed notice indicating that people had access to that driveway. Would that be correct?
Yes, so that's a good point, Commissioner Gibson. The parcel map is actually conditioned so that they'll have to provide a joint access easement between the two parcels there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then I drove out there the last couple of days just so I could get a set of eyes on this, because I was not on the commission when it first came before me, so I don't have the privilege of having some of the information that my other commissioners do have on this property. But I noticed that it looked like this property's already been rough graded. Is that correct?
That is correct. That was done with the project next door.
Okay, and then in looking at that, I noted that along the Ardmore section of Ardmore that this property fronts on, that there's a pretty significant steep slope that I'm just guessing runs about 25 feet from the sidewalk at about a 30-degree angle, would be my guess. And Nick, does that sound about right?
Yes, it's a 2-to-1 slope yield.
Okay.
Field.
You got it. So I guess my question was, because I was reading all this requirements about the robust landscaping, I was going, if the actual property sits what looks to be about, I don't know, a good 8 or 10 feet below the sidewalk, I don't know what you would plant that would stick up that high that would actually cover much of anything. I was just kind of curious, like what the thought was on that. What sort of robust landscaping would be suggested, knowing that there's a significant slope. I mean, what's the thought on that?
Well, from our point of view, it was why we're emphasizing the trees.
Right.
And that's, frankly, what I was holding. The ground cover materials and the shrubs, the basic ground cover is roughly 2 feet high, so that won't really do that much. But that's why, as I say, some of the other elements, grasses and so on, get up to about 5 feet or so, but they still wouldn't make much impact on Ardmore. That's, again, as I say, that's why I was trying to emphasize the trees.
Okay. So the thought is to have landscaping as opposed to some sort of more of a privacy screen sort of a fence?
Yeah, there wasn't much intent to do a privacy screen. It's the landscaping adjacent that we were relying on.
Okay, I was kind of follow up on your comment, Nick. I was just going, if you have a 2-foot plant and an 8-foot slope, you're not going to see the plant from the street. So I didn't understand, other than the erosion control, obviously you need to have erosion control. But so I just also want to get some clarity. So again, using the illustration that's up on the screen now, that probably would help. So I was just trying to figure out where the fencing actually would go. So starting with the top right corner, that black line that's running looks like just a couple feet from the sidewalk. That and then would be diving down into the slope. That's actually where the fence would go.
Yes, the fence starts at that north corner, as you saw. It runs south to the wine storage building and then turns west to connect to the wine storage building. We were using the wine storage building itself as the sort of the barrier for access to the property. We didn't see the point of doubling up the wine storage building and the fence they were redundant. I'll put it that way.
Right. No, I would agree with that. So then, can you continue describing that for me, Nick, on the other end of it, on the would be the south end of it? Does it then go back up the hill to the sidewalk and then run down?
No, there's no fence. That southwest corner, southeast corner, excuse me, the parking lot, it's not fenced until you come to the end of the driveway and the gates that go into the mini storage.
Okay.
That parking lot is open 24 hours.
All right. So that basically, that's just open to the public. I mean, you could walk in down the slope from that area. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then again, just can you show me or give me an idea of where the waste storage bin area would be? Because I'm not picking it up on the illustration.
The which storage?
Waste storage, yeah. Trash cans.
I think he's referring to the trash enclosure, which I believe is shown. Is it just to the south of the office there? Is that what that is?
To be honest with you, that didn't come up at DRC, and I haven't addressed it yet. So,
okay. I looked. I didn't see it anywhere.
Go back to bed, Field.
So one of the standard conditions.
I'm sorry.
So one of the standard conditions of approval is to provide a trash enclosure. So that's something we can work on with the applicants as we get closer to building permits and verifying some of the final details with the DRC. All
right, thank you. So can you explain, because just driving out there and I was a little taken by surprise there on the west side of the property was a large swale. And again, I'm still pretty new at this. So I'm trying to figure out, I mean, it just seems like every project we have the concept of water retention where we don't want water to run off the property. But I noticed on the left side of the screen, on the west side, that there's a very deep and significant swale or something that runs north to south. Can you explain the water retention plans and explain to me what is that existing swale along the which would be the backside of this project?
The swale is actually serves a quite a large geographic area. It comes down from the hills from the Chandler project. So it's carrying quite a bit of runoff in a flood or in a storm situation. And it's also designed to mitigate that runoff and trying to clean it up. We're going through these water quality control things where you try to filter runoff water to a certain extent. But our own site water is actually retention underground. I think David's probably seen those plans from the civil engineer. You won't see them in our site plan because they are underground. There's these underground chambers. There's quite a slew of them on both the north half and the south half of the project.
Okay. So then there was a mention somewhere about there about a drainage easement. Can you like point that out or explain what what the purpose and location of what the drainage easement would be?
We need to go back to site plan from this. There you go. There's a drainage easement going from the east to the west because it slopes in that direction. That 10-foot green at the top is an easement, and then behind the mini storage elements on the south is a 10-foot drainage easement. But then we've got I think it's a 25 or 30. David may remember the north to south on the west property line is the major drainage easement, which you're probably referring to, which you also saw when you went out there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. That is all my questions at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I had just a couple. There's on page 46 of the staff report under neighborhood compatibility, there's a statement that talks about considering the mini storage facility will be an indoor storage facility. I'm wondering if that conflicts with condition number 10 on page 56 that says all outdoor storage shall be screened from public view. Are we actually allowing any outdoor storage here, or is this simply indoor storage only, excluding any outdoor storage of elements?
And that's correct. So, and there's a specific site-specific condition that prohibits outdoor storage. It's intended to be all internal within the mini storage buildings. The condition on page 56 is a standard condition. And for clarification purposes, we could take that X out of that box if necessary, but it's just a standard catch-all check.
Okay. I would suggest that box be unchecked because it creates a little bit of conflict and ambiguity there. The only other question I had, and I was on the DRC when this came before us as well. There's on page 45 of the staff report under architecture and appearance, there's a statement, in quotes, colonial red, end quote, is proposed for the roof material. That's not consistent with the building elevations. And I know Nick talked about some of these things were a bit early in the game, but I have no idea what colonial red is. Can anybody lend a little help with that?
Yes. Colonial red is the red that's on the factory that's been built. And unfortunately, a computer at that angle doesn't get color very well because it's really just a very flat roof. It's a 1 in 12 pitch. But it's the same color that's on the existing factory building.
Okay, thank you. Those are the only specific questions I had. Did any of the commissioners have any questions that have come to mind in this discussion we just had?
Yes, this is Commissioner Christensen. I had a couple follow-up questions. I was kind of going back over the Exhibit A. And maybe it's more for staff. So they're a little, and maybe because I wasn't at the DRC meeting, obviously, but have we seen the final architectural elevations for all the buildings on site and final colors, like say for the wine storage? And I guess the other follow-up question is, I hadn't seen or heard anything about signage. And I know we've got that as part of the site-specific conditions of approval. And then I was looking at number 6 on page 53. It also mentions the underlying map to establish this parcel shall be recorded prior to issuance of building permit. And that was kind of the reason why I was talking about the sewer before, because I couldn't figure out why I was so confused before when I read this yesterday, but now I remembered that number 6 and number 12 and 13 kind of seem to conflict in some ways, and I just wanted some clarification in that. So if there's some way that I could get a clarification from staff on how that's meant to be handled, or maybe there's something on here that needs to be removed.
Sure, absolutely. So when this project came before the Planning Commission previously for the Daniels Woodland development plan for their facility, there was a subdivision that went along with that. And as Nick Gilman mentioned at the time that was done, the intent was to subdivide this project, sounded like for financing purposes. So staff has been moving forward with that project with the request by the applicant for the subdivision. As this project moved forward for these plans, because we did not have this level of detail with that previous project, so there was a requirement that this project come back with a development plan. So staff's been operating under the assumption that that subdivision was going to be moving forward. So tonight is kind of the first night we've heard that there might not be the intent of moving forward with the subdivision, and this is the applicant's choice. If they don't want to record the tentative map, it can expire out, or they could request to do it in the future. But one of the, based on that, I would request that the condition number 6 on page 53 be omitted. That requires that the parcel map be recorded prior to the issuance of a building permit, because that is not a situation we'd want to be in. Get the construction drawings going, get permits issued, and then run up against that condition. So I would agree with you, Commissioner Christensen, that is confusing. So I would request that the commission omit that condition. I would like Dave Athy to follow up to on that. Is there anything, David, that based on the not moving forward with a subdivision, is there any other changes to these conditions that we need to look into? I understand the sewer conditions are complicated. There's been a lot of work involved with easements, building sewer lines, timing of reimbursement, getting the septic systems going so that we could get the Daniels Woodland going prior to the sewer line being finalized. Is there anything that needs to be looked into there on those conditions? And maybe we give David some time just to double check those as we move forward with the process here. And then again, I do want to remind the chairman that we have Ron Daniels on the line who could probably help answer some of these questions as well.
That was going to be next.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. This is David Athy. So I think, like Darren mentioned, this is the first time I've heard that the property split may not be moving forward, and I definitely want to get Mr. Daniels to weigh in on that, because that may have a lot of implications to his, that has a lot of implications to his project. And I wouldn't want to change any of these to like hear that, but in the case where he does decide not to move forward, I think that we could modify number 12, minor modification, basically in the middle of the paragraph that says, instead of saying prior to, with the deed notification, that it'd be prior to any future lots. And I think we can word that appropriately. But I think the condition still stands pretty well based on the project. But with that, I would recommend having Mr. Daniels chime in at this point.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Thanks, David, for explaining that. I think that's a good idea as well, too. I'm not trying to make this difficult for the applicant. I'm glad that we can come to some clarification on it. So I would like to hear from Mr. Daniels on maybe his ideas about the lot split and maybe what his plans are.
Mr. Daniels, you have the microphone. Are you there?
Hear me? Yeah, hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. We can hear you.
You can hear me now. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for having me, and I really appreciate us drilling down on this on the lot split issue. And as has been mentioned, the original intent for the lot split was so that I can put some financing instruments in place that are independent of each other, and the timing of that was absolutely critical. But not the entire property, because we proceeded with our our factory financing and so forth, the entire project is encumbered in the original financing, making the lot split effort actually basically obsolete. So I have other funding sources to handle that. So there's no reason to proceed forward with a lot split, and the only benefit it gets me now is a higher property tax bill. So we don't have any plans on selling any portion of the land. We plan on maintaining it long term and owning it all and operating it all long term. So my hope would be to remove any conditions relating to the lot split. In fact, my hope would be, I don't know if Mr. Athey, he probably already knows the way I think, but I would hope to be able to use my existing sewer line access that I've already, paid for when I developed phase 1 of this property. We're not adding much usage to it. I'd hope to just be able to tie into that, beginning with using our existing septic system until sewer service is available, connected to Union Road by some other person's future development. And then once that sewer connection is made, I just would plan on diverting my septic feed right into the existing sewer connection that I've already paid for. So that's all I have to say about that. I don't know if there's any questions anybody has for me.
Mr. Daniels, could you elaborate a little bit more on the phasing of the construction of the mini storage versus the wine storage, the office, and so forth?
So I would, yes, I'd be happy to do that. I would like to proceed as fast as possible. So if all you guys can just help me harass Mr. Gilman to move this ball down the field, I would be more than happy to do it. I have no reason to wait. I want to go full speed ahead and get the entire project developed. We do have some details to flesh out on the office and the wine building, but I think that can be addressed in without too much time. So I would like to go as with all possible speed on that.
I'll take that to be your preference, is to do this as one project, one phase.
Can I, this is Nick again. Let me interject something. I see no reason why the Planning Commission would insist that there not be an occupancy permit until the whole project is complete. Yes, the owner's intent is to proceed now with all elements, the mini storage, the office, and the wine storage. But I can't guarantee that I'm going to get them completed at the same time, and I don't want to hold up utilization of parts that are completed at one point. I see no benefit to the city to make a requirement that you get no occupancy until the whole thing is complete. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I'll do my best, and the owner has intended to go ahead and do the whole thing. But man, I'm in construction, and I know that things happen, and things sometimes don't go the way you think they're going to go.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on that for sure. I appreciate that point. I would prefer not to have a condition of occupancy on the self-storage units. To be that everything else is completed, because the self-storage units are pretty easy construction, and they'll certainly go a lot faster than the most complicated parts of it. I think the self-storage units could be safely and efficiently operated, while the remainder, if there is more construction happening on the office and the wine building. And I know we also have space on the south half of our property, yard space and so forth on our factory side that we can stage materials and operate, a construction project for the office and the wine storage while customers are actively utilizing the dry storage portion. So I would prefer not to have any condition of occupancy, on the mini storage related to the rest of the project being completed. I do want to go as fast as I can, though, on all of it.
Darren, let me ask a question. So I think the concern would be that if this is phased, it's kind of the relationship of the phases and when fencing goes in and what screening goes in and what happens when Is that something that DRC can continue to look at since this has to come back to DRC? Or is that something we need to wrestle with tonight, that if it's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 phases or whatever, how do those fit together? Can you help me with that a bit?
Absolutely. And I think, really the clarification staff was looking for was the timing of start of construction. I understand the timing of occupancy and possibility of use of buildings while others are being built. And I think that, if we have a situation where, and I think it's really the office or at least the wine storage building. If that wasn't done, then there would be a hole in the project as viewed from Ardmore Road, and the request would be what's going to happen to that. But from what I'm hearing tonight, the whole idea is to start this construction as soon as possible and to get the wine storage and the office building going as soon as possible. I think if we understand that all of it's going to begin under one phase, and that if there is some finishing of mini storage buildings, but as long as we know that permits have been issued and there's construction happening on the wine storage building, I think we can work with the applicant on timing of use, as long as the engineering, the building, all those conditions have been met. So I do understand that. I think staff just wanted to make sure that we discussed whether there was going to be the request for delaying construction permits being issued for the wine storage building, because we see that as a major component of this project.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioner questions? This is a public hearing. We haven't opened it yet, and if anybody's out there wanting to comment, I'd like to get to that as soon as we can.
Commissioner Christensen, I just have one follow-up question to that from Darren. If the applicant starts working on the storage units, but then decides, you know what, I've decided I'm not doing a wine building, storage building there, can you help me understand, is that even an ability of them to do that? If so, what are the ramifications at that point? They're asking for an encroachment into the easement, and that's supposed to be a blocking view for the storage units, but do they have the ability to decide not to build that building?
I think what could be done is the Planning Commission could add a condition that says prior to the occupancy of any of the storage buildings, that the permit for the wine storage building shall be issued and under construction prior to the issuance of occupancy of one of the mini storage buildings. Again, we're just trying to get an idea here of timing, and we're just trying to understand from the applicants what the idea is here for timing of construction. And they've made it clear that its intent is that this project will start construction all as soon as possible, including the wine storage building. So I'm open to suggestions. We just wanted to make sure we discussed it, and I'm glad we have, because it helps clarify. But I'm open to suggestions on if there's any conditions that need to be included here. But really, I think, as Nick has indicated, this is a large construction project. Their intent is to get permits going and buildings under construction. And their intent is that many storage buildings could be completed and requested for final occupancy prior to some of the other components being finished. So I would maybe ask the applicants if there's any thing they would suggest for answering the question on timing of the wine storage building being completed.
Thanks, Darren. We'll put that back. I don't know. The applicant, would you like to respond to that, and then we'll get on to the public hearing, please?
I'm trying to think of, Ron, go ahead.
Yeah. I would like to have it done as soon as possible. I mean, if I was to throw a dart at the calendar, I would hope within the next 12 months we could be occupying it, the wine storage side too, the whole thing.
So a question from staff, maybe Ron and Nick, is it sounds like that the intent is to get the submittal and start of construction of the wine storage building is going to come before the permit issuance on the mini storage buildings because of the lag in getting the plans done for those mini storage buildings. Is that correct?
No, you got me totally lost. It takes me 2 months, guys, to get to DRC. It takes me then at least a month and a half to get construction drawings done. And then it takes probably 2.5 months to go through plan check. I am not going to guarantee any times on that mini storage building. I mean, on the wine storage building. I can't do that.
We've hashed this point out quite a bit, and I think I'd like to defer this perhaps until we get to the motion stage of this item, because this is a public hearing, and I don't know that we have anybody out there, but if we do, they've been patient for a very long time, and so I would like to open this up, open the public hearing and see if there are any comments, and if so, now would be the appropriate time to hear those from the public.
We have no other callers on the line.
Okay, thank you. Let me turn this back to the commission for discussion. There seems to be some issues here that are still a bit up in the air. Commissioner Davis, do you have wisdom to offer?
Oh, sorry, I didn't unmute. I'm looking at this as one phase, and I respect Nick's frustration on the timing of this. I'd like to be able to move forward. I don't have a recommendation on how to phrase that in a motion at this point. But I do have another question that surfaced, if I can go ahead and ask that.
Sure.
I know we didn't have anyone in the public comment period. I just wanted to ask staff, we haven't really ever talked about compatibility with the residents. I just want to know for sure that we haven't received anything in letter or email regarding the project.
No, I'm not aware of any public comments received from any neighbors.
Okay, because I mean, that's part of what we're supposed to, look into as well. We've been focusing in on the project, and I will look to fellow commissioners to kind of come up with some resolution on the phasing aspect. But I see it as kind of just one phase now is what I'm hearing from the applicant. That's all I have at this time.
Thank you. And I should note we have officially closed the public hearing. Commissioner Neal, comments, discussion points.
Just trying to think about some verbiage on the quote unquote non-phasing phased project. I wonder if it would be acceptable to occupancy of the first units is contingent upon approval of a building permit. For the wine storage and office building.
Any staff reaction to that?
That's what I had suggested earlier, but the applicant is indicating that that's not acceptable to them. Nick, the thought, the discussion was that getting an occupancy permit for one of the mini storage buildings could not happen until a building permit had been issued for the wine storage building.
So Darren, or anybody have the plans for the mini storage been submitted and approved?
No, no building plans have been submitted to building plan check at this point.
And I'm thinking that that's on a 2 or 3 month time frame. And if it's a 9-month construction, there's a full year of construction and plan check if the drawings are done. So I'm thinking that may very well fit in Mr. Gilman's time frame.
I realize you've closed the public hearing, but this is Nick again. No, no disagreement on that. Occupancy of elements that are finished, pending, yes, building permits would have been available, or certainly plan check, hopefully. I don't know what do you want to say, Joel? Permits issued for the remaining portions. Whatever you want to do there, I think we can deal with that. We can live with that.
And I think I would be comfortable with that. So, I mean,
I'll ask you to hold that thought, Commissioner Neal, because you're the consummate motion maker, and perhaps you'll help us with that a little later. Did you have other comments? I don't mean to cut you off at all. Do you? Other comments?
I'm a little disappointed that what seems to be a very nice facade and elevation for the office is completely blocked by the wine storage. But be that as it may, I think it'll be a fine project. And I would like to see something along that Ardmore street elevation. And I understand that we'll have about potentially about 12 or 13 feet of facade there. So it's not a huge facade, but it would be nice to be able to do something there. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Christensen, any other thoughts or comments?
I think that Commissioner Neal had a good idea on that resolution. I don't think we'd be talking about this as an issue if the wine storage unit wasn't being proposed as screening the other storage and also encroaching into the landscaping setback. Primarily, I think because it's encroaching in that, which is not in itself bad. I think it's not a bad concept to use it to screen the storage units. My concern is that the remainder would be built and then that wouldn't be followed through with, even if it was for some time. I know the applicant sounds to me like they very much want this thing to move forward, but you can understand that the concern, I think, really is evolved primarily around that issue. And other than that, I think it's a great project. I think it's going to be wonderful. So I would propose going along with something similar to what Commissioner Neal mentioned, and maybe we can see if that can work. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Castillo, any comments?
I will echo the sentiments that Commissioner Neal had made, but also can agree with Nick on his frustration. So I have nothing else to add to this.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gibson.
I would echo support for what I'm hearing from my fellow commissioners, and I'm comfortable with the idea that the language be crafted or developed that would basically state that occupancy of the storage units could be started as long as the building permits were issued and some sort of construction was started on the wine storage building. And I would also echo Commissioner Neal's thought that, once that building comes back, is more of a comment, is that I'd hope that as long as that building is in length, that somehow there's something creative to make it so it's not just a plain, wall. Looks more attractive than that. Two other things that have come up is that, again, I think Nick had indicated that slope as a 2-to-1 slope. So somehow, whenever that landscape plan comes forward, that it has to be addressed, that that there's going to be any sort of blocking of anything, including the building or any other part of the slope, that they're going to have to take into account that at the base of the slope is probably 8 or 10 feet down. So you'd have to have something pretty tall to even be able to see it at ground level. And then the last comment is that taking up the comment both from Commissioner Christensen in that conversation, as well as the applicant, Mr. Daniels, is that it would seem that I've been studying that paragraph 12 on page 54, and it would seem like almost that complete paragraph would have to be reworked. I would support the concept of tying in the what I would view to be a fairly minimal sewer needs or demand load, however you want to say it, for this project, and tie it into the existing sewer tie-in that Mr. Daniels is indicating he already has and is already paid for. So if that's the case, then there would not be a requirement to have a separate lift station on this parcel, and there would instead be an understanding or an agreement or condition that, or an allowance, again, however you want to characterize it, that this would be tied in. It would utilize the existing septic system that exists on the property to the south, and that when sewer becomes available, that it would tie in to the same sewer tie-in as the property to the south. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. I guess I agree with a number of the comments that have been offered, so I'm not going to reiterate those. I will confess to having a little bit of frustration with this. I realize that this is a dynamic project and it's got a lot of moving parts, but to spend as much time as we have as a commission level on phasing seems like something that should have been worked out prior to the time it came to us. I would put that slant a little bit on the sewer issue too, that it would have been helpful if the dialogue would have occurred maybe before this meeting took place. And even to the degree of some of the architectural elevations and things, and the elevation we're looking at right now on Ardmore Street perspective, having that flushed out a little bit more. And I realize that can come and go back to the DRC. But I think those things collectively would have contributed to a more streamlined discussion of this and would have been better for this evening. But that aside, any other discussion points from the commission? If not, I would ask if somebody would like to craft a motion.
Chairman Kogler, may I speak regarding the septic? This is David Appy.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify a few points that were made on item 12 or condition 12. So the project is set up to use the existing septic system with Mr. Daniels' manufacturing building. So that is in place, and this is what this condition reflects is their proposal to use that existing septic system. So that's fine. Mentioned before, staff were not aware that they were not going to move forward with their lot split, and so I have a simple fix, I think, that clarifies item 12 for the commission. If you'd like to hear that.
Simple would be wonderful. Go ahead.
Okay. Item 12, condition 12, middle of the paragraph where it says, and that prior to sale of either, and it says property. Instead of saying either property, say, and that prior to sale of either building, comma, as a result of a future lot split, comma, an easement will be granted to the mini storage for continued use of the septic system on the original plot. So I think if we just got rid of the word property and added building, comma, as a result of a future lot split, because you can still do the lot split, entitlement still valid. I think that addresses that issue and allows Mr. Daniels to move forward and reflects his current desire not to do the lot split.
That seems very reasonable. Thank you.
Commissioner Kohler, this
Yes,
is
sir.
Commissioner Gibson. So I appreciate David's suggestion. I don't know that it actually adequately addresses the idea that tying into the existing sewer line. So as opposed to having a separate sewer line, and I think that's a significant issue from both the city's and the applicant's perspective. It's a significant additional cost to the applicant that would seem to be unnecessary unless there is a lot split, and unless the city was anticipating at some point there would be a lot split. I don't know why they would need to have a separate sewer line, but I think that issue of the eventual sewer tie-in, because that is an eventuality, not a maybe, but eventually, you know, it is something that actually is going to happen. I think we need to clarify how that sewer tie-in is going to happen in the future.
Okay, so there is no tertiary sewer line that needs to be installed as part of this project, so the applicant will be allowed to tie into their existing septic system. As part of the development, they've already installed the sewer lateral that would serve this parcel. So simply all it would do is, when sewer is available, is they would just switch over from their lift station to the city sewer system. So there wouldn't be any additional sewer system or anything else constructed as part of this project. It basically, what item 12 reflects is their desire to use the septic system for their manufacturing building. And one thing, you know, we use deed notifications a lot. We see these problems crop up is when, you know, you do a lot split, everybody's happy, and you have these shared septic systems, like if someone's sharing a septic system, that lot split goes through, the lots get sold to different people, and all of a sudden they figure out afterwards that they have a joint sewer arrangement and there's no easement between them. And then in the best case, it goes well and people get along and they provide an easement and everybody keeps on going. But often what happens is the two parties start fighting over it. So condition 12 seeks to just notify the owners, if the lot split occurs, that there's a joint septic system arrangement and that they have to work together to make that, to have it work until such time as sewer is available to these parcels. So it really is a way of circumventing future problems down the road for the property owner. So that's what it's there for. But it also gives a second option for the landowner. So I've been trying to give options for the landowner on how to make his project work real well. But if he doesn't want this shared septic system, he could also apply for a septic waiver and install a separate septic system on his property. So it really is trying to provide the most flexibility for the site, while also keeping costs down and not requiring them to install new systems at this point.
Okay, so David, am I understanding you correctly? And thank you for the explanation. Am I understanding you correctly from an engineering perspective? Is that if the project moves forward and they go ahead and tie into the septic system, that when they switched over the sewer, I mean, they basically this particular parcel would basically it would not affect this parcel at all. The tie-in would just switch off from going into a sewer to going into from the septic. It would switch off from going from the septic into the sewer pretty much automatically.
That's correct. I mean, I'm sure he might have a small tie-in or some kind of little bit of construction to do, possibly. He may even have just Ron could set it up so he just has a valve he throws. But it's as simple as that. And Mr. Daniels, we've been working closely with him, and he's done a heck of a lot of work out there on the sewer system, along with his neighbors, Mr. David Spur and Case Pacific. So this sewer and sewerage in this area has been master planned with these gentlemen in order to make it work now and in the future. So you're correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I would ask if anybody would like to offer a motion.
Well, since you set me up, I will give it a whirl.
Thank you.
If I could ask Darren a question regarding item 6 on site-specific conditions of approval. We were looking to delete that item, Darren?
That would be correct.
Okay. All righty, let me see if I can give this a whirl. I move approval of draft resolution A, approving planned development 20-01 and conditional use permit 20-07, including that no occupancy of storage units shall be allowed until building permit for wine storage and office building is issued, as well as removal of condition number 6 on Exhibit A, site-specific conditions of approval, changing of the language to item 12 per city engineers Athy's suggestions. And then I believe Exhibit B, item 10, removing the check mark on, let's see, which item was that? Item 10 page. Was the
It's number 10, Exhibit B.
I believe. I lost my page number.
Page 56
Page
in the packet.
Page 56, thank you. Removal of the check mark on item 10 on page 56 of Exhibit B. Did you get that, Darren?
Yes.
I will second the motion.
We have a motion seconded by Commissioner Gibson. Any further discussion on this item?
I had one question on the stipulation for the what Commissioner Neal came up with for the solution. Can you say what was that wording again, so that occupancy wouldn't be allowed until the permits had been submitted for the wine storage? Is that what I understood?
So I stated no occupancy of storage units shall be allowed until building permit for wine storage and office buildings are issued.
Okay, thank you.
And just for clarification, those permits would be issued? Is that the language, Mr. Neal?
That is the language that I used.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. There's been a bit of discussion. Is there any more discussion on this before we vote? Hearing none, I would ask staff to call question, please.
Commissioners Neal.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson.
Aye.
Commissioner Castillo.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen.
Aye.
And Chairperson Pro Tem Kogler.
Aye.
Motion
Motion is
passes
approved.
6-0.
Great, thank you very much. That concludes our public hearings for tonight. I believe item H, if I get back in my agenda here, is discussion items. Staff, are there discussion items you would like to put forward before the commission?
Just getting us situated here. So no discussion items, and looking for the consent calendar action.
Great, thank you. Darren, can we take the consent calendar, both of them together? Do you prefer the DRC be separated from the Planning Commission?
They can be taken together.
Okay, great, thank you. Did any of the commission members have comments, questions, changes on either the DRC set of minutes that were in there for June 29th and July 6th, and then the Planning Commission minutes for June 23rd?
I'll move approval.
I'll second that.
Motion by Neal to approve. Davis, second. We can call the roll on that one.
Commissioners Neal.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Castillo,
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
and Chairperson Pro Tem Kogler.
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Other reports, item J. Other committee reports? Have staff updates?
No other reports.
Okay, thank you. Item K, Planning Commissioner's comments. We'll kind of run down the line. Comments, Commissioner Davis.
I have none. Thank you.
We'll move down to Commissioner Neal.
I would just like to apologize to my fellow DRC members for completely missing the Monday, July 6th meeting.
On behalf of the group, we'll accept your apology, even though none was probably needed. Commissioner Christensen, any comments?
I just want to say thank you to the staff tonight. I know there was a lot of curveballs thrown in some questions we had, but I'm glad we got those clarified, and I want to thank the commissioners. I think your input was great. Thank you.
Commissioner Castillo?
I will be sending a formal email out later this week, but I just want to let my fellow commissioners know and staff know that I will be leaving for Arkansas for a month for training and will not be available for DRC. So I will probably be sending out a request if anyone can cover down or switch with me for a different month.
Okay, very well. Mr. Gibson?
I just want to wish our commissioner well and commiserate with him for being in Arkansas in a hot and humid month. So other than that, thank you, everybody. You did a really good job tonight.
Thank you. I have nothing more to offer. Any final staff comments? You want to talk a little bit about what we've got next time around?
Yes, absolutely. So we are scheduled for the July 28th Planning Commission meeting to have the Beechwood specific plan on that agenda. And we're looking at having the staff reports and information earlier this time. We're looking to do it mid next week, Wednesday or Thursday is our plans. We're working hard on that. That would also include, we'll have an executive summary related to the final EIR that kind of outlines the changes since the draft EIR you have, so that you don't have to try and guess with that huge document what the changes are. So that will be included. So that's related to the Beechwood specific plan. The other item to mention is on your calendars, if you put August 4th on your calendar, that's a regular council meeting, but we'll be looking at having a joint Planning Commission council session related to the housing element. So that's pretty standard to have a session to go over that. We're not exactly sure if that's going to be an item on the council agenda or if maybe prior to the 6:30 start time, maybe there'll be a session with the commission on the housing element. So stay tuned for that, but just want you to pencil in August 4th on your calendar for that. And that would conclude staff's comments at this time.
Thanks, Darren. Darren, do you know, will there be another housing committee meeting prior to that time?
I'm not aware of any housing committee meetings prior to that joint meeting.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll make note of August 4th, and there will be some interaction with the council occurring either before or during the council meeting that night. Very good.
And we'll provide more information as we have it to keep the commission appraised of what's happening for that agenda.
Great. Thank you very much.
I do have a question, Commissioner Kogler,
Yes.
Chair Kogler. I'm presuming that will all be on Microsoft Teams. We're presuming to stay in that format. I will be on vacation August 4th, then I might be able to find some Wi-Fi if I come down the mountain. But do we have any clarification? Will we stay in this format?
Yes, we'll be staying in this format for the next few months. Once we hear something different, we'll let the commission know.
Very good, thank you. My last comment would be I would just like to thank my fellow commissioners for indulging me in wandering through this meeting and trying to level some aspect of leadership and control in Roberta's absence. And I look forward to the fact that she's back in a couple of weeks when the action gets even more interesting. So with that, if there's nothing else from my fellow commissioners, and I'll pause for a second, and I don't think there is, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Sherry Davis.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and I believe that stands without a vote, and we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, staff.
Thank you. Good night.